Hello there. This is the sort of video I don't really want to make, but it's about a whiskey disappointment. And yet I'm going to tell you about it because sometimes a distillery really changes its core offer. And if you have been a real fan of what was on offer, the new delivery can be a real disappointment. So it is the beginning of May. And despite the fact that we've been having hailstorms here in Orkney, my thoughts are turning to summer. And so I was looking at an old photograph of a summer whiskey collection. Now, you may not be able to see that, and I know that you want to really look at me, but just to make sure that you can see what was on offer in this picture, we will put the picture on the video. Well, not we, Mr. Moon will do it. And it's got some lovely summer dishes, some tzatziki, a roasted pepper salad, and a kind of a Greek style feta cheese salad in the picture. And because my interest is very much in whiskey and food matching, I remember with such affection going to the Tobermory distillery in Mull. And it was on one of our Where Shall We Live in Scotland holidays. And I had contacted the distillery to say that we were going to be on Mull and could I arrange to have a trip round the distillery with a bit more info than the standard tour. And I had such a lovely time with them. It was just super fascinating, sort of Victorian building built into the side of this impossible cliff and it was impossible to give the sort of space that you can imagine in a distillery. So there was a lot of up and down and sort of mezzanine levels, and the lengths that they went to create their whiskey was incredible. So I was talking then about the Tobermory 10-year-old whiskey, and from the same distillery comes the Leitchick whiskies, which look as though they're Ledaig on the bottle, but I'm assured that it's called Leitchick. And completely different, and I really like them both. And it was the distillery team actually who said how brilliant the Tobermory 10-year-old was with summer food, such as a really good feta cheese salad. And I tried it out with my whiskey club in Sussex, and they loved it. So I'd not had a bottle for several years, so I thought I would order one and relive that. Of course, I'd forgotten about the shutdown at Tobermory, and I hadn't really taken on board that change had happened in quite such a big way. So the signature whiskey now from Tobermory is a 12-year-old. The 10 was in a green bottle and was very pale in colour. This is in a clear bottle, and as you can see, it's much more amber. And I guess that's what alerted me when I first unpacked it out of the box that it was going to be different. It's got a very full nose. There's no tang of saltiness or anything to it. I'll try and dig out my old video of the Tobermory 10, and then we can post that perhaps next week so that you can compare and contrast. But it's a deep, rich nose now. This is now a 12-year-old, but I don't think 2 extra years in wood would make that much difference to it. So, as I say, I was getting much more in the sort of way of a maritime flavour and a light, bright summer whiskey. I personally really believe that you don't want to drink the same drams in the summer as you do in the winter, because everything changes, doesn't it? Apart from here in Orkney when we get hail all the time. So, big rich nose is really quite attractive. Lots of fruit and lots of spice, and slightly, to me, rich notes, sort of sultana-ish, but just totally different. So, now in the mouth, there's lots of top fruit in there still, And this is an unpeated whiskey, but woo, it's got a big, big spicy finish on the side of your tongue. So there is a lot of sort of appley notes in the middle of your tongue. But this tingly sides is totally dominating. And you would honestly think that that was peated in some way. But after my first sip, I feel a bit like a ruminating cow. And please, no writing in and saying that's what I look like. But as you run your tongue round your mouth, what you're getting is almost licorice. Now, licorice, of course, I think technically is a spice. And it is a flavour that crops up a lot. But you either like licorice or you don't. You know, I mean, I don't go out of my way to have it. It's something I quite like in moderation. But in here, where my memories of food and flavours and drink is, licorice is something I cannot compute with the Tobermory, which was a light, bright, relaxed, casual, outdoory sort of whiskey for me. Now, that's not to say that this is bad, but I think it's gone a bit kind of mass market, and it's lost its originality and its uniqueness. You know, I had the Tobermory 10 in a tasting with Writer's Tears and Irish whiskey, Asila, sadly really not widely available anymore because Compass Box have knocked it on the head. The Old Pulteney Navigator, a non-age statement, which I love. And then the Nika coffee grains. So again, bright, light whiskies. And that was a lovely summer collection. And this certainly wouldn't fit in with that now. I mean, on the second sip, lots of fruit. The appliness has gone. So there's much more of a kind of a baked flavour to it. But this side of the tongue, licoricey, almost burnt cinnamon is all dominant. Now it's 46, I think 46.3, yeah, percent ABV. So that's a big whack really for a 12-year-old. That's a technical way of saying that's a high alcohol for a whiskey of this age. So I'm going to add just a splidge of water to it. And there was something else I should have done before I did that, but it's too late to take the water out now. And we'll see if that homogenizes the flavour hit. Yeah, I mean, that puts it back. It does even out the flavour, but it doesn't even out the finish. And so there is still this big spiciness, which I think is just a little bit uncontrolled in this whiskey. It's not a bad whiskey. Now, don't think that. But to me, as a Tobermory 10 fan, it is a disappointment. Now, that's really bad to have a newsflash come up. And I'm afraid that on my iPad, I obviously haven't set airplane mode to knock that noise out. Apologise, I am such an amateur. Tobermory Distillery on Mull is part of the same group as Deanston, so Distel, which is in itself part of a South African-owned group, who own 3 ships and you know another few whiskies as well. And although, as we discussed with the Deanston 12, which I absolutely love, they're not kind of mainstream here, more's the pity, but they do have a good place in the export market. And I wonder whether this has been tweaked to give a bit more welly to what they can offer for outside of the UK. I think it's getting close to the Deanston, but apart from this huge wallop of finish. So when I tasted it, I immediately went to the whiskey barrel and got out this, the Glenallachie 12-year-old. Now this is a Speyside whiskey, very similar in colour. The Glenallachie is a little bit darker. And again, I bought this on a whim because I love the Limerick 12-year-old, which is a peated whiskey, and Billy Walker, who put Glendronach back on the cult whiskey trail, is now the master blender at this company, and he produced the Limerick 12-year-old, which is terrific, and I don't really think I've told you about that, so I must get a bottle and then I can rave on about it. But I bought the Glenallachie, which is kind of the signature expression again, 12-year-old, to have a taste of it. And like the Tobermory, big fruity nose, but not as much spice. Not the big appley hit, a bit more sherry, but in a much more controlled way. What I get again at the end of this whiskey is licorice. And if I'm just drinking the Glenallachie, it is much, much more apparent. Having had the Tobermory, this amount of licorice, oops, twiddle twiddle, isn't so obvious. But I do really like this with food, and especially spicy foods. The way in which I try and conclude my whiskey videos, yeah, as always, the second sip of the Glenallachie is much more homogenised in flavour. That doesn't mean to say that that's a bad thing. For homogenised, just take balanced. And richer. This is more suave and sophisticated and elegant than this. And yet they are really remarkably similar. This is slightly more punchy. I think the Glenallachie is 46%. Yeah, 46% ABV alcohol by volume. So this one is slightly stronger, and maybe that's where the oomph comes from. But in terms of would I buy them again, which I think is like looking at art and would you hang it on the wall, on your wall, would I buy these again? I have to say that with the amount of lovely whiskey out there that I would like to have regularly in my whiskey barrel, I probably will buy neither of these again. And I really don't like making whiskey videos that are negative, so I must stress that these aren't bad whiskies, but it's simply that there are other whiskies that I like more. And really, you know, sometimes people write and say, how does the new Highland Park 12-year-old compare to the old 12-year-old? Why do people play around with core expressions? Well, obviously, they might run out of the vital barrel or batch that, you know, goes into making their signature aged whiskey. And so things have to change. On the Highland Park 12-year-old, I think the current one is much fruitier than the previous one. And it's, again, I think it's gentler and slightly less edgy, although the previous one was immensely easy to drink. And I think although it's really understandable that has changed a little bit. I cannot understand why the Tobermory has changed so hugely. Now look, if you never tasted the 10-year-old and you like a spicy whiskey, then yeah, do go and buy this, because you're certainly not going to be disappointed. And it's a very reasonable price. It's an under £50 whiskey, I think. And if that's not the case, I will indeed revise that on the video. But for me, thinking about this, and you know, it would have been a bottle to take to the beach with a picnic lunch, and it certainly isn't anymore. And because I don't really want to make other disappointed videos, I had been thinking about why I wasn't jumping on the supermarket bandwagon when people were raving about, especially this, the Ben Bracken Speyside single malt from Lidl. So I bought a bottle of it. It's a non-age statement, but it had recently got a bronze medal in the World Whisky Awards, and I think it's had other awards as well. And whilst I might say to you these are around the £50 mark, this was under 20. In fact, I think it was about £16. And the best I can tell you about this is that it is inoffensive. So, you, dear viewer, can make up your own mind about what I think about that. And yes, use it for whiskey cocktails, or it's not even my favourite whiskey, with a can of ginger ale, which is something I love, a Scotch and dry ginger. So yeah, I'm afraid it's a thumbs down from me. Do I know any more than the judges of the Whisky Awards or the World Whisky Awards? Well, I doubt it, but I've got an old palate that's tasted some fantastic things over the years. So I probably shall finish the whiskey in my glass, and I'm going to head out to the garden now and do some digging, and hope that I don't dig up all the good things and leave the weeds. But if you're after a summer sunny whiskey, I'm afraid the Tobermory isn't that anymore. And that's just how it is. As I say, if you'd never tasted the 10 in the old style, you may well love this, especially if you like licorice. And there's an awful lot of people out there that do. So, cheers for now, and see you next time for something that will be much more positive. Keep drumming. That's how I liked it. The 10-year-old with a Greek salad in the sun. Happy days.